Hello everyone, it's Jyoti here. And today I would like to take you through a tutorial around one of my favorite postures, the camel pose, Ustrasana. It's a very deep back bend, it's a heart opener, it stretches the whole front of the torso, opens up the shoulders and chest. It's a delicious back extension. It also opens up the throat, the whole throat chakra area, which is a place that often many of us have quite a bit of restriction and constriction there, either physically or energetically. And the throat chakra is our center of self-expression in the world, of putting out our creativity as we express ourselves in the world. So it's important to keep that place energetically and physically in us open so we can really live authentically and live out loud, as they say. And of course, keeping the heart open. There's so many different levels in which we need to do that. And just to keep our spine flexible as well. So it's important when we do Ustrasana, the camel pose, that we really take time to warm up our spine with all of the essential movements of the spine, especially some gentle back bends, because camel is a very deep back bend, and you don't want to go right into a deep back bend without sufficiently warming up. So some of the things that you can do to warm up, I'll come over here so you can see, is just coming onto your hands and knees and starting with some cat-cow. I'm just going to give you a few short examples of poses that can prepare us for camel, but I encourage you to take some time, maybe to turn off the video and take some time to do this for a longer period so that you really know that you're safely warmed up. So you take some cat-cow poses, and then maybe sink back into child's pose. Walking the hands forward. And then I love to do this little slide through, opening up into cobra pose, imagining that I'm pushing a ping pong ball with my nose through my hands. Spread the elbows wide, slide through until the heart comes between the thumbs, and then lift up into, starting with a low cobra. Maybe even lifting your hands and reaching back and taking it into snake pose. Keeping the legs energized and the tops of the feet pressing down into the mat. And then hands come under the shoulders, maybe pressing up into a full cobra, peeling the whole torso off of the mat, but keeping the pelvis and the pubic bone rooted down. Taking that delicious heart-opening back bend here. And releasing, pressing up through table. Take another cat stretch around the spine, draw the navel in, squeeze out all the breath. Bring the chin to the chest and sink back into child. And maybe you want to take a few more of those, sliding through, opening the heart, coming into your expression of cobra, either baby or full cobra. Rounding into a cat stretch, maybe coming up onto fingertips here so you get a little bit more lift. And sinking back into child's pose. So maybe you want to take a few more of those to open up the spine in its extension, back bend, and then the complementary action, the forward bend here. Another nice warm up for back bends is to come into Sphinx pose. So you can start from your table and slide your hands forward into the puppy stretch. Melt the forehead down to the mat, or maybe chin if that's available to you. Reach the sitting bones back. And this is also called heart melting pose, so you can let your heart sink down toward the mat. As you reach your hands forward, your hips back, try to get that abdominal lift, navel in and up to support your spine. And then lower the forearms down. And draw the body forward into Sphinx. Your Sphinx pose, you want to press down into the elbows. The elbows are lined up right underneath your shoulders. And the toes point back. The legs are energized. You can feel the little engagement of the quadriceps, the kneecaps lift, the tops of the feet press down. And draw your shoulders back. Draw your heart forward. If you press down into your forearms, you can get a little bit more lift and lengthen in the front of the torso and the lower ribs. Maybe even drawing the elbows isometrically toward the body. Find a little bit more space in the solar plexus area. And maybe here you want to take it into bending the knees and bringing the tips of the toes, big toes together, bringing the heels as close to the buttocks as you can comfortably go. And then if you want to juice this up a little bit more, you can press down and forward into the hands, straightening the elbows either just a little bit or all the way, looking up. This is kind of mashup of the seal pose and the sphinx pose. Lowering the elbows down, the legs down, and rolling forehead down, hands underneath the shoulders. Press up into your table pose. Again, take a nice cat stretch so you get that forward bend, opposite movement of the spine. And sink back into your child's pose. And come back up into your table pose. And another nice warm-up for Camel is just to open the chest and the heart center a little bit. So interlace your fingers behind you, clasping your hands in the yoga mudra pose, lengthening your arms. See if you can straighten your arms and draw them back behind you to the back edge of your mat. And here you just want to be on your knees. Squeeze the shoulder blades toward the center of the back so you can really feel the chest expand wide open as the crown of the head lifts up to the sky. Straight up. You don't need to tilt your head back here. You can just lift straight up and just feel that expansion through the chest as the shoulder blades come toward the center. And if you find that your elbows bend and it's a little too tight for your shoulders, then you can take a strap and just give yourself a few inches of space with the strap behind you. Draw the hands back behind you. Try to lift the hands away from your hips and buttocks. And just enjoy that expansion across the chest. All right. And when you feel complete with that, then we can go into our different stages of exploring Ustrasana, the camel pose. And because this is a deep back bend, I'll show you first the gentlest way to come into camel pose. And for some people, this most gentle way might be exactly what you need and might be just enough. So you still get plenty of benefit out of doing the pose, even if you're coming into the simplest, gentlest expression. So that would be coming onto your knees with the shoulders and the hips and the knees aligned. So it's like you're standing in mountain pose, except you're on your knees. So some of you might want to use knee pads or a folded blanket in order to feel comfortable here. And then you want to root the tailbone down and lift up through the spine, right up through the crown of the head. And that means keeping the back of the neck long at first, so the chin stays level. And you want to keep that alignment of the hips over the knees. So as you bring your hands back behind you, you're going to press into the low back, just framing the sacrum. And see if you can draw the elbows to point straight back. So without even taking a back bend, and just lifting up from root to crown, and drawing the elbows toward one another, so that the shoulder blades come toward one another, and the elbows point straight back, you may notice that wonderful opening in the chest right there. And maybe that's just enough for you. If you press your palms, your fingers want to be pointing down. If you press your hands into your low back and lift the lower ribs away from the hips so you have a little more space between your lower ribs and your pelvis, then perhaps you can take it into a little bit of an arching back, turning the heart to the sky. Now, depending on the comfort level in your neck, some of you it might be appropriate to keep your chin level or just keep it tucked and just let it be a back bend and a heart opener rather than a neck extension. If it's comfortable, you can let your head go back. Chin lifts up, gaze lifts up. Big deep breath. You want to keep your hips over your knees, thigh bones straight up and down, and then pressing into the low back to come straight up. So the next level of practice would be to use blocks beside you on either side of where your arms would be. And maybe you'll need to be on fingertips. Maybe you'll be able to bring your hands flat. So your blocks are kind of lined up with the center of around where your calves are. You're going to start with your hands pressing into the low back just like we did to get that lift. And then reaching one hand to the block, the other hand to the block, press into the block and lift. Imagine that there is a golden cord tied around your heart, suspended from the heavens, lifting your heart to the sky. Only if it's comfortable, let your head go back. Squeeze the shoulder blades together, lift up through the heart. And then to come out, bring one hand to the low back, beside the sacrum, the other hand to the low back. Press into your low back as you lift up and let the head come up last. One of the things you can do, if this feels like a strain on your neck and it feels too much neck extension, you can take a blanket and open your blanket the long way. And then you'll fold your blanket in half the long way. This is a really wonderful way that can free up Camel and make it feel safe for people who have any kind of neck injury or reason why you need to be cautious around your neck. I mean, everyone needs to be cautious around your neck, but some more so than others. And we're going to fold the blanket again, and then again. So you've made a really long, like a stole, which you can put around your neck, and then cross around the heart and give it a nice snug pull. So now you've got all this support behind the neck to let the head go back. So I'm going to show you then the next, another way that you can do this is to take your block and place the block upright, right between the calves, behind you, just squeezed between the calves. You want to keep your hips straight up here, over your knees, and then not let them lean back. So the lift and the back bend, so the back bend comes from a lifting up through the spine and then arching back, rather than a leaning back with the thighs and using your quads there. So coming back, letting your hands, one hand come to one edge of the block, letting a hand come to another edge of the block, and lifting up, let that golden cord lift your heart to the sky. Let your chin lift, and now you've got that support to let the neck go back. To come out, again, one hand presses into the low back beside the sacrum, and lift up. The other one comes, and then you lift up. And see how you feel there. One of the things you can do, sometimes reaching this block is a little bit difficult. For some people, it's just the very tips of your fingers can barely reach. If that's the case, you can make a little shelf, like so, with the blocks. So you can place one block going the long way, the other block going upright, and then you've got a lot easier access to reach the corners of the block. I'm going to turn this way so that you can see what that looks like. So starting here, one hand comes behind, the other hand comes behind. Squeeze the shoulder blades together. Okay, the next level of the practice, if you feel comfortable with that and want to take it deeper, the next level of challenge would be to curl your toes under which lifts the heels a little bit. And that gives you access to reach back for your heels right around the Achilles tendon. You can either have your thumbs in and the fingers on the outside of your ankle, or for a little bit more shoulder stretch and upper arm rotation, turn it the other way, thumbs outside. You can take a deep breath in. And exhale, stick out your tongue with a to clear out that throat chakra point. And again, big breath in through the nose. Exhale, stick out your tongue and go. Bring one hand to the low back, the other hand to the low back, and lift up. Now, I'm just showing you many different variations of camel, so you don't need to do all these different ones in one practice. You don't want to overdo it. But I will show you the fullest expression of camel pose, which is to have your toes, tops of the feet pressing into the mat, toes pointed back. One hand comes down to the heel, the other hand comes down to the heel. And again, open the chest. Feel that golden cord lifting the heart to the sky. Open the throat, big breath in. Keep the hip pointers drawing forward so your thigh bones stay vertical. And just hold for about 3 to 5 breaths, making sure that you come out slowly, pressing one hand and then the other into the low back. Lift up. Let the head come up last. And soften the shoulders. Maybe roll the shoulders, roll the neck. And again, when you do camel pose, it's fine to do it, just let it be a chest opener and keep your chin level if it's not comfortable for you to put your head back. So that's fine. One of the things that happens in camel pose that people need to be reminded of is that you want to stay with your hips stacked over your knees. So some people go into camel like this. This is not camel pose because you see here how I'm not getting a back bend. I'm getting a great activity, a lot of activity happening in my quads, in my thighs, but I'm not getting that back extension because I want to keep the hips, the hip pointers pressing forward, and my knees about hip width apart, so right under my hips, and that will give you the back extension. So one of the ways to practice that is to come against the wall and press your hip pointers and your pubic bone into the wall. And then take camel, keeping that pubic bone attached to the wall. So that's a great way to train yourself to keep that alignment, because sometimes it's hard to tell when your hips are going back, when you're bent backwards and you're looking back behind you. So now, the complementary pose, it's always good when you do a deep back bend one way to then move the spine in the other direction as a complement to that pose. So I'm going to take you through the rabbit pose, which is the traditional complementary pose to the camel. So you're going to start in child's pose, but you're going to bring your inner thighs together and let your belly rest on top of your thighs. Forehead comes down. And hands come down beside you, so your hands are beside your feet. And just take a few breaths to feel any energy and any releasing and lengthening in the low back here. You might find it around the lumbar area or the sacrum area that you feel some energy. As you keep those inner thighs snuggled together, you notice that there's a little space right between your knees. And we're going to bring our nose to point toward that spot. But first, take your hands and bring them up over the backs of your heels, so over the Achilles tendon. You're going to lift your hips just a little bit to bring your hands over the backs of your heels to grab your ankles from the inside so that your palms face that little ankle bone, pointy bone on the inside of your ankle. So you're going to grab the inside of your ankles. The knuckles are going to face one another, so the backs of the hands face each other. And then as you grab your ankle, lift the hips and roll onto the crown of the head. Maybe even tucking the nose a little closer toward that space between the knees so you can come onto the very top of the head. And here you want to have some pulling action in two directions. You're going to lift the low back and the hips toward the sky to try to straighten your thighs. At the same time, holding snugly on the inside of the ankle so the arms straighten. So you're going to feel a nice rounding of the back as you reach the center of the back up to the sky. Lift, 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 and pull. Lift the hips, pull on the ankles, arms straight. Maybe you even want to take a little rocking forward and back on the crown of the head to massage the cranium. You're going to lift and pull so you feel that deep spinal flexion here. Creating space between the vertebrae as you lift and pull. And when you're ready to release, float the sitting bones back to the heels. Release your hands. Just come into your child's pose. Feel all the energy that you've invited in with this deep back bend, deep forward bend. And then when you're ready, take a moment to integrate that sequence by rolling over onto your back and taking a few moments of Shavasana. And then when you're ready, you can take as long as you'd like in Shavasana. And when you're ready to come out, just hug your knees into your chest in Apanasana, giving yourself an embrace, rock side to side, and then roll over onto one side and slowly press yourself up back to a seated posture. And I hope you've enjoyed this exploration of Ustrasana, the camel pose, with its complement, the rabbit pose. And I hope that you can enjoy exploring how you can practice these poses safely, using the props for support, and enjoy the benefits of an open heart, open throat, and spinal flexibility that it brings. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.